Have you ever thought about what it would be like to travel for not just 2 or 3 years, but 10 years of consistent solo travel? Have you ever thought about what it would be like to do this as someone from a tier B or C country? Someone, say, uh, like our guest today, who comes from Brazil. His name is Arthur, aka Gringo Nation. We're going to be sitting down. We're going to be talking about long term solo travel and making it all happen as a Brazilian national. Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. Arthur, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Vance. It's a pleasure being here. I've been following you. I found you on Twitter actually the first time, so it's cool to finally meet you in person as well.
Absolutely. And I said Arthur, but I guess in Brazilian Portuguese it would be Artur.
Artur, that's right. Yeah, but in English I just go by Art. It's easier.
Art's easier. Okay. And where are you at right now?
I'm actually in the Philippines in Cebu City.
Cebu City, Philippines. And what brings you out there?
Well, I actually left Brazil about a year ago on this trip, and I knew I wanted to come to Southeast Asia because it's a region I really love, but I hadn't had the opportunity to cover it on my YouTube channel yet because I
Mhm.
did about 6 years of solo traveling before I even started the channel, and by then I'd already been to Southeast Asia twice. So I kind of wanted to make sure and cover a region that I love so much on the channel, and that's kind of what brought me here. But I stopped by several other countries before coming here.
Okay. So I think you're the second Brazilian that we've had with like a true travel focus. We had on I don't know if you've heard of him, but his name is or their channel is Viajo Logo Existe, Leo Spencer,
Oh,
and he's like a van life guy who did over 100 countries in a van with his wife and child, and they have I think multiple kids now, or
oh
no,
wow, that's
they have
so.
at least one kid and traveled in the van with the kid and everything.
Oh wow, I think I have heard of them. But you know what? It's funny because I don't follow Brazilian content creators too much because my content is in English, so I'm always kind of like making sure to see what other people are doing in English, and I end up not paying too much attention to Brazilian content creators, but I should definitely.
So we'll get into some philosophical ideas around travel, and once you kind of hit that 10 year mark, maybe getting a little introspective. Um,
Yeah.
to kick it off, I wanted to talk about making money online and how you do it
Right.
as a Brazilian. Because if you can do it as a Brazilian, what is your fucking excuse to the Americans, the Canadians, the Brits, the Australians? Like, you know what I mean? So you have the YouTube channel. We'll shut that out. It's Gringo Nation at Gringo
That's right.
Nation.
Yeah.
Pretty good handle.
Mhm.
You must have got
Yeah.
that pretty
Thanks, man.
early. So, so
Well, I
that
don't
was a
know.
good
I
one.
guess the gringo thing a lot of people may have, but Gringo Nation maybe was just easier. But it's actually named that because I guess one thing you don't know about me is that I grew up in California.
Hmm.
So my family, because we were there for 10 years, my parents did a citizenship test, and so
Hmm.
I am both Brazilian and American. So
Yeah.
when I returned to
You're
Brazil,
killing my narrative of
yeah, I often pretend like either, of course I identify as being Brazilian because not only was I born there, but I lived there for about 15 years.
Mhm.
So when my family returned to Sao Paulo after being in the States for 10 years, everyone was calling me Gringo. So that's practically my name in Brazil. People still call me Gringo 25 years later.
Okay. And what do you do to make money online?
Well, essentially, I am an English teacher, so I do that through my American passport. Of course, I work for a Singaporean company, and slowly building the YouTube channel, and it was monetized about 3 years ago, and since then, just trying to find ways to keep that income growing slowly, and so there's that. And then I also do some other social media stuff, the occasional sponsor or promotion, I promote travel insurance.
Safety wing.
safety wing. Yep.
Have you ever made any good money with safety wing? I'm just curious.
No, I've never made any amazing money. But you know what they've been doing recently is like monthly promotions where you can create content around their products, and they just pay a flat fee for that. So I can make like $100 a month from that. Um,
Hmm.
so sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't. But yeah, it's pretty easy money, honestly.
I know, random aside here, but a friend of mine, Cashly Kucherin, her website is Travel Off Path. She's a previous podcast guest. She was
Oh
at
yeah, I
least
know
for a
her.
time one of the top five safety wing affiliates in the world. And
Oh wow,
they would like fly her out to Tulum for the offsites and all that stuff. So it's
that's
doable if you get the
amazing.
traffic, I guess.
It is doable. Ultimately, I've entered a phase where I'm like, if I'm going to be promoting anything, I want it to be my own products. So
Hmm.
this past year, I've worked a lot on a digital product of mine. Just released it like a month ago. It's called 10 things I learned in 10 years of travel, and it's
Hmm.
basically just 10 lessons in the form of 10 travels. A PDF product. I'll be pushing that much more than the travel.
Yeah. So let's get into that. Let's talk about, 10 years of travel. I'm coming up on that, not quite, but I'm at since 2018. So I guess about six and a
Yeah,
half
you're like
years
4 years
of
to that.
consistent
Yeah.
travel. And like basically in a backpack the whole time. What is, okay, first question. What is your travel set up? Carry on only?
Carry on only, yeah, that's something, I think you kind of have to work up to that. After many years of training, I was finally able to do that. Of course, being a digital nomad, having and being a content creator as well, like having laptops and mics and cameras, means you do have to take an extra backpack. So I travel with two smallish backpacks. In terms of clothing, it's about 10 kilos.
Two backpacks. And you put the one backpack in the other backpack or something? Or
No. So it's basically one backpack with electronics and the other one with clothing. So I take one as a personal item, even though,
uh-huh.
you know, I just kind of sometimes they let me board with it, sometimes they don't, kind of thing. Here in Southeast Asia, they don't really seem to care too much. Like I've been on, I don't know, like 10 flights recently, and I was able to board with two backpacks every single time.
So you have two backpacks and a rolly uh,
No, I
carry-on
just
thing?
have two backpacks.
Just two backpacks. Okay, so you don't
Yeah.
do a maleta. What do you call it? Like a carry-on
No, like
bag.
actual luggage. No,
Huh. Okay. Why do you choose to do it that way?
just to travel light. In terms of clothing, I don't really need too much. And over the years, I've just realized that I always had stuff I wasn't wearing. So eventually, I just figured, why do I have this stuff? And this trip was particularly difficult because I started it in the winter in Europe. So like I went to London in December. It was fucking freezing. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss here. And so I had like pants and jackets and things like that. And then over the time, like over the year, I just started shedding some items of clothing. Um, Sometimes I also like take clothes to like a sewing place, and I ask someone to like turn pants into shorts or something like that. But I end up just leaving a lot of you know items behind, and yeah, I never see them again.
Okay. Two backpacks. That's crazy. And then when you're like walking in and out of the airport and stuff, do you do it like one in the back, one in the front, or you just like hold it in your hand?
Yeah, it's pretty much like it's more comfortable to do one in the back and one in the front. But my clothing one is that brand Cat, like Caterpillar.
Sure.
Um, yeah, so they have a bit of a handle, so you can kind of carry it as a briefcase as well. So sometimes I do that. But in terms of body balance, yeah, like it's good to do one back one. Mhm.
Okay. Cool. Fair enough. Um, yeah, and let's get into, 10 years. I imagine you probably the way that you travel and the way that you've made money online and maybe your purpose of travel has changed over time. Obviously, 2020 happened, 4.5 years ago, and then that was its own set of challenges. But you've been, I guess, remote and traveling the world even 5 years before that. So you got started pretty early, dude. You got started in 2014.
Yeah, that's right. Ironically, that was the year that the World Cup was in Brazil, and I should have stayed for that, but I didn't. I moved across the world to Melbourne in Australia, so I had to watch the World Cup at like 3 or 4 a.m., which was not a good start.
Okay, keep going. Tell me, like, yeah, I mean, how did you make it work in those early days?
When I left Brazil, I got a sever. I worked for MTV Brazil for about 6 years, and they went through a bit of a political shift, and they had to fire the whole company, which meant that they had to pay me a severance check. So I got quite a bit of money at the time from that, and I just kind of looked at my bank account and thought that maybe it was time to do something a bit different. I guess I'd been wanting to travel for a couple of years now, so I did some research into working holiday visas through my American passport, and I saw my options. If I'm not mistaken, they were like, besides Australia, there was also like Ireland and South Korea, maybe. I don't remember all of the. But I ended up opting for Australia. Yeah, actually broke up with my girlfriend of like 5 years and moved to Melbourne. Um, I thought maybe I could get like a hospitality job or something. Turns out in Melbourne, they want people with experience, so that was extremely difficult. So I didn't get a job for like 6 months. Just spending like I was you know a rookie in terms of travel, so just spending tons of money on rent and food, and I basically blew through my severance check in like 6 months. I blew through half of my money in like 6 months. Um, but I also did a fair bit of traveling during that time. I went to Southeast Asia for the first time, went to Vietnam, went to Thailand. That's kind of when the travel bug really bit me, I think.
Mhm.
And then eventually made my way back to Melbourne and, got some hospitality jobs. I learned how to make coffee, became a barista, ended up doing that 1 year in Australia. And then when my working holiday visa ran out in Australia, I went to New Zealand for 2 years, also worked in hospitality there, made coffee, scooping ice cream for 2 years. So, yeah, I was kind of in that region of the world for the first 3 years, just kind of working hospitality jobs and not even considering creating content or anything like that.
Right, kind of local jobs. And now that you've kind of cracked the code of making money online to some extent, right? You're teaching English and you got the YouTube and everything. Would you ever go back to working like an in-person job in hospitality or otherwise?
I like how you said to some extent because I'm definitely not like completely satisfied with the making money online thing. So honestly, would I consider it? Yeah, I've thought about it actually, but I just don't think my body can take it. Like I was mopping floors at 29, and I was already feeling like the physical effects of that, and doing shifts where you're like standing for 12 hours. So I don't know if at the ripe age of 40 I'd be able to handle it. But I met a lot of great people working those hospitality jobs, and I certainly had a lot of fun. Something I look back on fondly, but I'm just not really good with customer service. So maybe for that reason alone, I wouldn't go back. Like I just can't handle customers too well.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, so many reasons, right? The freedom and then also probably the more scalability aspect of making money online, right? Like you can only
Yeah,
sweep one floor at a time.
yeah, exactly. And as you said, like obviously working a hospitality job doesn't give you much freedom. You can take like a pretty long vacation, as I did. I probably went to Southeast Asia for 1 or 2 months and then came back and I still had the job, which, is I think it's one of the advantages of working a hospitality job. But in reality, working online, of course, you have much more freedom. And even though, it's quite possible I make less money teaching English online than I did in my hospitality jobs. I'd have to do the math on that one. But I certainly do get the freedom. And that's why I keep doing it, I guess, for now.
So, what does teaching English online actually make? Like, how much are people looking at for hour per hour if someone was to get into this? Oh,
Hey, man, lost you there for a sec.
okay. And we're back. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. Um, so what I was asking was, if someone was to teach English online and take this path, how much would they be looking at making? Is it lucrative?
Um, I would definitely not call it lucrative. I think that whole industry is a bit of a bubble, like in the negative sense, where they just really don't pay their teachers too well. But I do it in a very specific way where I've figured out exactly how much I need to just keep the train rolling on. And once I reach that number of classes, which to me is 200, 230-minute classes a month, so that's about 100 hours of teaching every month,
Uh huh.
I just stop. So I'm able to reach that mark by week 3. So I
Hmm.
just do 3 weeks of work and then I take a 1 week vacation. So I could be making more if I worked that extra week every month, but I'd rather just keep my sanity.
Interesting. Okay. Well, at least you're able to. Not everyone's in that position to be able to make enough by week 3 to support their whole month, right? A lot of people are even closer paycheck to paycheck than that.
Yeah, and I recognize that as a privilege, but that's only because I'm in Southeast Asia right now. So of course, if I was in many places in Europe or in the US or even in your home country of Canada, we all know that wouldn't be possible. So of course, you have to take advantage of the geo arbitrage, as they call it, which is gaining in dollars and just making your dollars go further in countries where that's possible, where the economy just is a little uh, lower. Yeah.
And I want to get a little bit philosophical with you, and
Hmm.
I want you to. I I want to just like let you cook, let you talk about some stuff. But one of the concerns that people have, or one of the criticisms that people have of digital nomads, is they're earning so little money and so unambitious that they wouldn't actually be able to live back home, and that they're actually living in these cheaper destinations out of necessity. They're saying, bro, you're making 2, 3 grand online, and for some reason you're happy with that, but you wouldn't be able to survive in Boston or maybe even a nice area of Sao Paulo with that, right? So what do you think about that sort of dynamic?
um, well, I think that as I said, I don't consider myself an American. So honestly, I really have no interest in living in America, which I think works out because, as you said, I would not be able to afford it. I know how much the rent is in the U.S. I'm very far from earning enough to make a living there. But as far as South America goes, there are many places where the amount that I make, I could make that work. In Sao Paulo, of course, you kind of have to pick and choose which restaurants you go to. Don't go out every week, kind of thing. But I could definitely make it work in Sao Paulo, and that's actually the plan. Next year, I'm going back to Sao Paulo, and I do plan on making that work somehow. But it's very true that you can't make the amount of money that I make and just pick anywhere in the world to move to, right? You have to be very strategic about the locations and the regions, and also the time of year. Like, it'd be quite a silly move
Mhm.
to go to Europe during the summer or anything like that. Um, yeah, so it takes a lot of planning and a lot of strategy as well to do what I do, and I think that's you know a lot of the stuff I learned in the past 10 years through a lot of trial and error. I was able to make this life work, and I think it's what I wanted for a long time. Now I'm actually kind of wanting something different, but I'm kind of proud to say that I kind of reached my goals, and I made it possible, right? Like, no life is perfect, but I think I kind of reached my goals in that sense.
You've definitely done a pretty diverse range of countries. If someone was to look at your YouTube, you have done a fair bit of Latin America, actually. Um, Colombia, Mexico, Nicaragua, um, I'm sure more. And
Yeah, that
then,
was
jumping over
one.
to, and just to give people a range of ideas before we jump into any specific countries, but also Tunisia, which I really want to go to, Georgia, um, trying to see what else here. I mean, but like Albania. So pretty good kind of range of countries in all of the different regions. Like you're definitely not just like a Southeast Asia guy or something. Like you're kind of
Mhm,
everywhere. Um, so obviously a wide range of experiences have been doable even as a budget traveler.
it's true. So actually, I think for my YouTube channel, that even though it shows a wide range of locations, a lot of people have been known to do well on YouTube when they niche down on either a specific country or a specific region.
Hmm.
So that's something I've been considering as well, because with travel YouTube, oftentimes if you spend enough time in a country, you kind of build up an audience there, and then when you leave that country, people just aren't as interested as they were when you were in their country. But you're right. I have been able to go to a lot of different locations and regions. Some I made work more than others, and of course, at times I was making more money as well because I have worked for other companies that paid me a little better in the past. But I did do one trip, which was pretty much from Peru to Mexico, passing through most countries in between. And I was working for a South American company at the time, and that was teaching groups of children online. And I just don't do very well with children, so with groups of children, it was even worse. And I was really stressed, and I couldn't work enough to pay the bills. I was just like trying to work the bare minimum, but it really wasn't enough because I was having to change countries every month and catch flights and buses and all this stuff. Um, and man, honestly, I was kind of miserable through most of that trip. So that's something I actually wrote about it in the PDF document I was talking about, which is sometimes shoestring budget becomes like a shackle, right? Like it really ties you
Hmm.
down, and you just don't have as much. Like, it kind of takes all the purpose away from travel. Like, you're there to have new experiences, meet new people, do amazing things, and just experience life in general, and you're stuck in an Airbnb. Like, oftentimes my salary would come in and I would pay the Airbnb, put some money away for food, literally lock the door and wait till the next paycheck came in the next month, so like, that's that was I think that was 2 years ago now. So that's really when I started to consider, like, is this the best way of traveling, because it really didn't feel like it.
And do you felt that you just couldn't figure out how to make more money, or just that you weren't willing to like put in the extra hours, or a bit of both? Or
Yeah, a bit of both. I was just like extremely stressed with the job I had, which was the teaching groups of children. So I couldn't bring myself to do more of it. And in terms of YouTube, it's something I've never tried to rely on too much. And at the time, I was probably making half of what I'm making now, so that wasn't any significant income or anything. Um, of course, at the time or a little later, I started looking into other careers, and I realized that I might want to be some sort of like group tour, uh, group tour guide or something like that.
Hmm.
And I invested a lot of time and did a lot of interviews with that. Unfortunately, none of those really panned out, but it was something I was trying to get into for a while. So it's something I still think about. Yeah, I'd consider trying that again one.
And let's kind of get into the whole, 10 years traveling. Now, maybe you're getting homesick or thinking about starting a family. I'm assuming single, but you tell
Yeah,
me.
single
Uh,
and not thinking about family just
no,
yet. No.
no Brazilian, Filipino babies running around.
No, well, not that I know of. You know.
The classic line. So is that something that you're um, more thinking about now?
I'm not thinking about family too much in terms of getting married and having children or anything like that. But I am for a while now. I have been thinking about having just more company in general, not only romantic company, but of course, all my best friends are in Brazil, and I miss them a lot. Um, and I think having traveled for so long in the beginning, it was very much like I am a solo traveler. I can do everything myself and I can take on all these challenges and I don't need anyone else. I'm amazing and all this stuff. And that worked for many years and I found excitement in this sort of life, meeting new people all the time, saying goodbye to those people all the time, having temporary girlfriends here and there. But I think I'm
Mhm.
just at a moment in my life where I've realized that I hate to sound cliche, but I'm sure a lot of your listeners have watched the movie Into the Wild that has the famous phrase like happiness is only real when shared, which I think there is some truth to that. A lot of the stuff I live might have been or would be more exciting with a partner or a friend or something like that. Um, and I think I've also just realized that people are extremely important. And maybe it took me a decade to figure that out, but it's definitely something I've been thinking about lately a lot. And, my parents are getting older as well, and I've spent 10 years away from them. So, you know,
Mhm.
I do want to be closer to them. And I have two nieces as well. My first niece was born in 2014, so she was literally born the year I left, and I watched her grow, from other countries, and we know each other a little better now. But every in the beginning, every time I'd go home, she'd be like, "Who the hell is this guy?" kind of thing, and I'm not sure I want that to happen with
Mhm.
my other niece who was just born last year. Yeah, I think being closer to friends and family is something I really want to do next.
And when you say, your best friends live in Brazil, are these more people that you knew kind of up to age 30 or people that you met well on the road or a mix of both
No, so these are my friends essentially from high school.
from
So
high
I
school?
moved back to Brazil when I was around 13.
Mhm.
So yeah, the friends I made at that time, and years later, I'm a musician, so a few bands in Brazil.
Ah, cool.
I made some friends that way.
And, and the reason I ask is because, especially with, high school friends and things like that, when you're away for 10 years, it's like, they'll still follow you on Instagram and, but it's like, there's definitely, it's obviously not as close as it used to be. And you might find that, like, oh, like these guys I used to be super tight with, I didn't even get invited to their wedding or something because I'm just not like in the top 10 friends anymore, or things like that. And
Yeah,
it's kind of this like weird dynamic where you pop in and they'll maybe come out for a beer when you pop in, but it's like, like I said, you miss a lot as well. How's that kind of experience been for you?
yeah. It's funny you mentioned the wedding thing. It's funny because everyone knows that I'm never in Brazil, so I don't think I'm even considered as a person that should be invited or not to any wedding. Not because they don't. like me or anything, but just because they know I'm never there, so it's not something they even consider. Yeah, so many changes, like I when I left my group of friends, I had a group of friends that a lot of people were kind of like dating each other in that group of friends. And then I went away for some years. When I came back, like everyone had gotten divorced or separated. Of course, some of my friends had children. Some of my best friends got married. My sister got married. She's she's not with that person anymore, but I missed her wedding as well. And my parents also have a band, and they played at her wedding, which was like a very special moment. And I wasn't there to see that. Um, and every time I go back, like things are completely different. And I do have like a core group of friends that are like three or four friends that I keep in touch with via um, Zoom and whatnot. So I have managed to keep like my really good friends, and that those are still very good relationships. But their lives are always completely different every time I go back, and many of them have like their own careers, of course, and they spend a lot of time at work. So when I go back to Brazil, sometimes it's not like you're just hanging with the friends all the time. You're just kind of waiting
Hmm.
for them to get off work because, as I've told you, I have a very flexible work schedule. And then it's like, you have to wait till Friday rolls around, which is something I haven't thought of like for a decade, right? So it's always a strange feeling going home, and it never felt like home. Um, of course, in many ways it does, but essentially, I don't think it feels like home anymore. And what's kind of, I don't know if it's sad or uncomfortable or what it is, but sometimes just being on the road is what feels like home. And that's kind of a scary thought to me. I'm not sure I like it. So I want to investigate that a little more next year.
Did you feel bad to miss your sister's wedding?
Yeah, I felt bad about it. I felt more bad because, as I said, it was like a very special moment that my parents were playing and stuff. Um, yeah, but it wasn't just hers. I felt bad. Like I missed so many weddings, and I missed a lot of divorces too, which I don't know if that's good or bad. But
That's a good
um,
answer.
yeah, it's crazy. It changes so much. And even in the past year, it's changed a lot. So now when I go back in February, I'll be in a totally new situation once more.
And tell us a little bit more about the 10 lessons learned from 10 years of travel. What some of those lessons are.
Right. Well, without giving too much away, I would say, you know, year one, 2014, was basically take a chance, right? Like, I have no idea what my life would have been like had I not boarded that plane from Sao Paulo to Melbourne in 2014, because it was a chain reaction, right? Like once I arrived in Australia, as I said, traveled to Southeast Asia for the first time, and I think I've kind of been chasing a lot of those feelings of freedom and liberty that I had at the time, which kind of were the fuel maybe for the next decade of travel. Um, so it was very much a chain reaction, and I could definitely say that my life would have been completely different had I stayed in Sao Paulo.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Crema Social. Crema Social is like TikTok for international dating. It's an app you can download right now on your phone, and 3 out of 4 people on Crema are single women. The app was founded in Colombia, so unsurprisingly, there are a lot of Latinas on the app, by the way. So, how does it work? Crema Social is a social meal experience where you invite a hot girl for a lunch date via video call and food delivery. New concept, so you'll have to try it out for yourself, but this is probably the best way to meet Latinas before you visit the country. So if you're in Latin America or planning to visit Latin America, download Crema Social now and start getting dates right away. There will be a link in the description to download, or just search Crema Social on your favorite app store. Have fun, guys. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Bit Refill. Bit Refill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Job Stacking. If you are a remote or hybrid worker looking to maximize your earning potential, then Rolf Holtze, the author of Job Stacking, guarantees you'll be able to double your income. This is the exact system Rolf has used to take his own income and those of many others beyond 20K a month. So what is job stacking? It's this idea of working multiple remote jobs. You might have heard Rolf, he's worked 5, 7, even 9 remote jobs at the same time before. And by the way, job stacking works equally well for non-technical roles. So no, it's not just for the nerds. So if you're ready to job stack, then book a discovery call with job stacking and see how they can double your income in just 9 weeks. In the show notes in the description, there will be a link where you can book a call directly on the Calendly of job stacking and be talking with them as early as tomorrow about how to double your income as quickly as possible.
But I can't tell you if it would be better or worse. Like maybe I would have tried, climbing the corporate ladder somehow, and maybe I'd be even, maybe I'd be completely miserable had I stayed in Brazil. So I am very proud of a lot of the things I've accomplished in these 10 years, and it's all because I took a chance, right? So in that chapter, I write that stagnation is a destiny worse than uh, airline peanuts, right? Like stagnation for me is never an option. So the first lesson of the, I don't know if I'd call it a book, but of the book is take a chance. Yeah, and then I kind of go through a lot of short stories of my travels in each chapter. So each lesson is like uh, comes out of kind of a short story and how I learned that lesson in each of the chapters.
Okay. Give us some more of the lessons.
All right. Well, I've talked about some of the lessons here today. So the shoestring budget one is definitely one of the lessons. Um, where, as I said, I just kind of felt completely miserable traveling on a shoestring budget for a year. So that's one of them. Let me think. Oh, one of the chapters talks a lot about mental health. I think over the years, I've, you know, learned some techniques to try to keep myself reasonably sane because I spent a lot of time alone, which, as I said in the beginning, felt right and felt nice. But with time, it becomes kind of a strange feelings, and you start comparing yourself to a lot of people, especially people back home that have families and careers and things like that, and you start getting some
Mm-hmm.
negative thoughts swirling in your head. So I've learned how to keep myself sane, whether that be exercising, doing yoga, meditating. I've learned how to take care of my gut, which is like super important. That I learned this year. I started taking like
Mm.
probiotics that really were a huge benefit to my mental health. I was learning about like
How
gut
does that
healing.
work? Tell me about the gut stuff because I live in Mexico, so I
Okay.
think what we do here is drink Coca Cola and eat chips all year, and then and street tacos, and then every 6 months we take a pill that like kills all the bugs in the stomach.
Yeah,
So
like you're talking more about parasites, right? Like,
parasites, yeah.
uh,
There's like a parasite killer pill that Mexicans take every
yeah,
6 months. I'm not
oh,
sure
I've
if the
taken
audience
it.
knows that. But it sounds like you have a better system than that.
Yeah, it was a really like amazing moment for me because all of a sudden, before coming to the Philippines, I was in Malaysia for 3 months, and while I was in Malaysia, I started having like these really heavy like gastric crisis. where just kind of felt like, at the risk of grossing out your listeners, really severe diarrhea, but like also heavy gastritis and cramps, and I couldn't have a meal without like having to run to the toilet 2 minutes later. um, and that's at the same time I was starting to feel kind of down and depressed in a way, and maybe because of all the things we've talked about here today, like just being alone all the time and things like that, just feeling kind of lonely. And then I felt like, and then I started doing some research, and I felt like maybe the mental health crisis was causing the gut stuff. um, and I
Mm,
tried a lot of different stuff, started doing therapy. Things got a little better, but not too much. And then one day I was just researching about this gut brain axis, gut brain connection, and I learned about probiotics. And I just went to Watson's and I bought some probiotics, just kind of like maybe this will help me like 5% or something, right? And then I started
mhm,
taking them, and you know, the next day I was feeling a little better, and then the next day a little better, and in 5 days, all my like mental health symptoms, like I was feeling a bit of depression and anxiety, or like severe anxiety. All of my symptoms had gone away like 100%, and I couldn't believe it because I just started taking the probiotics. Like maybe this will help, kind of, and it completely like rid me of all my symptoms. So I
So,
couldn't
so just
recommend it.
like a general probiotic, like off the
Just a general
shelf,
probiotic.
just like
Yeah.
Google probiotic pill on Amazon, I guess, and like whatever shows up.
Yeah, I went to Watson's and I got one of their probiotics for like $10 or something like that. It was really cheap, and I've already those were like a month's worth. And they say it's good to diversify your probiotics. Like if you buy one kind, then the next month you should get another one. So yeah, the
Okay,
next month I got another one, and yeah,
that kind of
it's
makes
been
sense.
like a life changer completely.
Okay. Any other good epiphanies or lessons from the book?
Yeah, let me just see if I can think of one more. Actually, I mean, maybe I should try to pull it up quickly here. All right, so okay, yeah. So lesson two in 2015 is talk and listen to strangers. So basically, when I was traveling around Indonesia for the first time, um, I was staying at a hostel, and some dude, it was movie night or something, and some dude walked in, and I kind of looked at him and I judged him, and I was like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" Kind didn't really seem like someone I'd want to hang out with. Didn't even talk to the guy. Um, but the universe had other plans. He started talking to me, and we both found out that we were living in Melbourne at the time. He asked if I wanted to go around and go to some happy hour bars around the island and stuff, and we started hanging out. And we've been best friends ever since. We've traveled to like 7 or 8 countries together. When I was living in Mexico, he went to visit me. He's met my family down in Brazil. We've traveled to Europe together, Southeast Asia. I was just in Thailand with him. Um, that's one of the examples of like, talk to people and listen to their stories. When I was in Thailand for the first time, I met a girl who was a digital nomad. This was in 2015. It wasn't so common at the time.
Hmm.
We were walking around Phuket one day, and she's like, "I got to go now, teach a class in my hotel room." And I was like, "What do you mean? What class? Like, what are you teaching?" She's like, "Oh, I just teach some English to get some extra money." And I was like, "Wow, that's amazing. All you need is like a dodgy internet connection, and you can just get extra money and keep on traveling." And she's like, "Yeah, that's what I do." And as I said, that wasn't a very common concept at the time. So that blew my mind. And years later, I was in Thailand training to be a teacher myself. So
Hmm.
um, I think especially when you've been traveling as long as I have, you have the a lot of times you feel like, and this is of human nature, of course, like a lot of time we just want to talk about our experiences and what we've been doing and where we've been and how many countries we've seen and all the stuff we've done. But it's so much more important to listen to other people's stories, because that can really change the course of your own life, and give you some new ideas and new perspectives. And especially when you're traveling, like all of these people, especially nowadays, they have some sort of, income usually, and it's usually online income, and you can kind of learn some other stuff that you could be doing instead of teaching English or something like that, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, lesson two is talk and listen to strangers. It's an important one.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. I mean, I think that that's what people argue is the main benefit of living in a high-powered city like whatever New York or Sao Paulo is that they ask other people how they make money and they make networking connections and then they increase their own income. And again, there's no reason you can't do that in a hostel or a co-working space or whatever, right? Um, you'd be surprised if you go up to just random white dudes in Philippines or whatever that you see working at a coffee shop on their laptop. You just go, "Hey, man, not sure how busy you are, but like, was just kind of curious what your story is. Seems like you're making money online," and they'll just be like, "Oh yeah, hell yeah, I do X Y Z. I'm a cybersecurity guy, whatever it is, right?" And um, it's just that easy.
Yeah, and that's something I love about not only about travel. Maybe it's more about Southeast Asia. Like I think a lot of Westerners, when they come to Southeast Asia, they're kind of living this adventure, and they're much more open to meeting people and to talking to strangers. So it's so much easier to do what you just talked about, to go up to someone and meet a stranger when you're kind of both strangers in a faraway land. Like people are just more open to talking about their own
Exactly. It's
lives.
harder. It would be harder in Sao Paulo. Go up to some guy in a cafe, right, and be like, "Hey, man, what are you working
Absolutely.
on?"
Oh yeah, in Sao Paulo they'll probably be afraid of you, like they're trying to scam them or, or rob them or something.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed in general is that it's a lot when you meet entrepreneurs and people abroad, you build a deeper connection much faster. I'm sure you have noticed this, right? Where if
Mhm.
you were to meet that same lawyer guy in Sao Paulo, he's not inviting you to the barbecue. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Or like maybe he doesn't even want to trade WhatsApp numbers or something. But you meet that same Sao Paulo lawyer guy working online, whatever it is, in the Philippines, and one thing leads to the next, and you guys are like smoking hookah at like some roadside bar, and like he's talking about his divorce or like whatever it is, right? You know what I mean? So it's just like
Uh-huh.
the relationship gets deeper so much faster when you bring someone out of, I think, a more formal environment and put them in a more informal environment.
Hey,
And we're back.
yeah, so you're absolutely right, and that's um, something that I think has kept me traveling as well, because I've built so many strong connections traveling that whenever I leave home, I'm like, oh, maybe this time I'll meet even cooler people, and it's just like the excitement of meeting people on the road is just much higher than meeting people back home, I think.
And we have maybe like 5, 9 minutes left here. What have been some of your favorite experiences or most unique experience over the past 10 years? No pressure.
Yeah, right. It's always a hard question, because whenever I think back on it later, I'm like, oh, I should have said that, but I didn't remember it at the time. I'll tell you, one very special, like in terms of travel experiences, I think, have you been to Guatemala?
I have not.
Yeah, so in Antigua in Guatemala, they have a volcano, an active volcano called Acatenango. Um, and you can climb that volcano And then there's another volcano, another active volcano just a kilometer away that erupts every 45 minutes. So it's like really intense, really loud. The volcano you're climbing kind of like shakes when that happens. And it happens every 40 minutes, and you spend the night there at the lower peak or the lower level.
Hmm.
So during the night, you're kind of waking up to your tent, like shaking all the time, and then you open it and you see all this lava and stuff. Like, even though it's a kilometer away, it seems like it's really close. It's so beautiful. And then you wake up at like 4 or 5 a.m. to get to the peak and kind of see it as the sun is rising. That was definitely a very special travel experience for sure. Um, you know, a lot of I want to talk about this. It's just something I remembered because I did it recently. I was in Thailand a decade ago, and of course, I'm a big movie buff, and a lot of people know they filmed the beach movie in Thailand. And at the time, I was even reading the book, but I had heard it was just a bit of a tourist trap, and I was like, "Oh, I'm too cool for that. I don't want to do it. It's a waste of money." Blah blah blah. And I
Hmm.
really regretted it. Like years later, I'm like, oh, that's so silly of me. Like I was right next to the place. I love the movie. Why not go check it out? Who cares? Like at least if it's bad, at least I can tell people it's bad, right? Because I lived the experience. But I didn't do it, and I felt really bad about it. So this year I went back to Thailand, went back to Koh Phi Phi, which is the island, and I righted that wrong. So oftentimes I like kind of going to places that maybe some movies were filmed in. Like I I remember walking around Vienna where they filmed Before Sunrise or one of those three movies. That's something I really love doing. Yeah, there's been honestly so many, amazing travel experiences, and I can't remember any other right now. But if I have some more time,
Yeah, I actually had thought about this. I don't know where I read it, but I remember reading uh, a travel blog with the guy that he was in Egypt. You've been to Egypt. He was in Egypt, and he had the opportunity to go inside one of the pyramids, and he had already done a lot of pyramid stuff that day, right? But they said, "Hey man, it's gonna be 25 bucks to go in this pyramid." So, and he's like, nah, it's kind of a rip off, and they didn't go in that pyramid. And then he was reflecting on it later, and he's like, "Man, when am I gonna be in
yeah,
Luxor, Egypt again? Right? And it's gonna cost me a lot more money to fly there and stay there again to if I wanted to visit that thing." So it's like sometimes things might seem like a bit of a ripoff, or you don't want to like splurge that extra $10 or $100, whatever it is, to do that next extra thing. But it's like, look, you're already there. You're never there's like, if not now, when? Right? And so
Mhm.
sometimes you just got to do it.
Yeah, and I was very lucky to have that opportunity again because obviously Thailand is across the world. Like it's one of my favorite countries, but who knew if I would ever come back? And I'm glad you mentioned Tunisia because a lot of people don't know, but a lot of the Star Wars movies were filmed in Tunisia and
Yeah.
were
I said
inspired
Egypt,
by.
but yeah, sorry. I don't fuck. I did say Egypt, but yeah, dude, I heard about the Star Wars thing. It's in the south of Tunisia.
Yeah. Well, there is the famous place where it's an actual set that they just kept there. But what's interesting about Tunisia is like a lot of the scouting before the movie was even filmed, a lot of the scouting was done in Tunisia. So they went to a lot of historical Tunisian places.
Hmm.
So a lot of the architecture you see like on the Star Wars planets were inspired by like real life buildings in Tunisia. And even though those
Hmm.
buildings didn't make the movie, you go there and you're like, wow, this is like a Star Wars planet. It looks exactly the same. So like the scouting work in Tunisia was pretty crazy, and you see a lot of like the clothing they wear in the Tunisian desert as well is exactly like the Jedi's wear and things like that. So like
Yeah,
honestly, Star Wars is just like so much taken from Tunisia. It's incredible.
that's cool. Yeah, I heard. Did you go to any other countries there? Libya, Algeria.
No, I spent 1 month in Egypt, which was my dream, like life dream. I've always wanted to go to Egypt. And then
Hmm.
just because I was traveling with a friend, so just because we were kind of close, we decided to stay in the same like weather region for another 2 months. So we decided to do Tunisia, not for any particular reason, just because it was there and the weather would be nice. Um, and that was a really cool experience as well because I do like going to countries that are a little off the beaten path sometimes, and not a lot of
Hmm.
people have traveled there, and I would recommend going there. Um, so no, I would. That was my first time in Africa. Like even after 10 years, I've only made it to Africa this year. So I hope to go back to the south of Africa one day, South Africa and Namibia. I'd like to.
Yeah, one thing I always kind of point out is like you have all these rich people in Canada, the US, and they've never been to Egypt, they've never been to Japan. And it's like, how have you never seen the pyramids? You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
you've done both of those things.
yeah, man. You know, I Canadians tend to travel more than Americans for some reason. Americans, I think they just like traveling within their own country, and of course, the America has lots of beautiful spots, but you don't really get the some of the most amazing aspects of travel, which is everything we've talked about today, right? Like meeting new people and having
Mhm.
experiences you just can't have in the US. Like you can't do maybe in Hawaii you can do an active volcano thing, but I'm pretty sure you can't on the mainland.
Yeah. Yeah, Canadians kind of have to because it's winter 6 months a year, where Canadians can or Americans can just go to Florida. But there's a whole wide world out there. Um, so yeah, man, why don't we got to wrap up? I got another call, so why don't you kind of take this time to share a final message with the audience where they can find you. I'll be tagging the YouTube channel in
Awesome.
the description in the show notes, but kind of share whatever you want to share.
Yeah, thanks so much. First for the invitation. I think it's really cool what you do on Twitter, where you inspire people to know that there are alternative lives out there, that are much cheaper.
Hmm.
And I think that is a real gateway to building your own business and doing what you feel like you were put on this earth to do, because that's what happens when you move to countries where life is more affordable. You're able to recover some of your time back and work on things that matter to you. And you're not just on the corporate rat race, right? So thank you so much for having me here. As far as travel goes, um, it's such a wild journey. And the thing is, like, if you don't do it, you'll always be with that, like, what if in your head, right? Like, what if I'd done this? What if I'd done that? Um, a phrase I use a lot is like, my dream is to die with memories and not dreams, which is something I really believe in. And the motto of my channel is like, rewrite your story through travel, right? So my main thing is like, try to make my life a book worth reading, make it a page turner, because ultimately I think that's what it's all
Hmm.
about, right? Like having fun and making use of this amazing life that we have. Yeah, and I hope to meet everyone who's out there listening on the channel. Don't be a stranger in the comments, and hope to get to everyone's country as well. I make it happen as I can, right? Like $1 at a time, one country at a time. But it's been almost 50 in the last 10 years. Hopefully, there are more to come.
Awesome, man. Thanks again for doing this. Again, our guest today is Art from Gringo Nation. This has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please be sure to subscribe. We put out 2 episodes a week with amazing guests like Art, and you won't want to miss an episode. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave a review as well. And by the way, if you leave a review and actually send me a screenshot of that, you can get a free consultation with My Latin Life. But that's it for now. Ciao for now.